This is Halloween. This is Halloween. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome for another multi-voice-ing. I am the multi-voice reviewer. I have scary voices because it's Halloween. And today I'm gonna do a review of something that I haven't tackled in before. Now, this one came from a series called The Masters of Horror. And I'm not a huge fan of Masters of Horror. There's only some episodes or TV movie series that I like. Kind of like how I am with Tales from the Crypt. There's some episodes I like, some episodes I don't like. But I want to tackle this one typical one that is based on Native American folklore. Now, the reason why I want to tackle on the Native American folklore, because one thing you should know about me, ladies and gentlemen, is that I myself am Native American. And what made me say that is because, well, my grandmother's grandmother, is it, yeah, my grandmother's grandmother, she married a guy who is Cherokee, so I'm pretty much part Cherokee. And I always have a certain fascination to the whole Native American ways, the old fashioned Native American ways and spiritual things. And one thing that got my interest the most is, of course, Native American folklore. I mean, I heard that Guillermo del Toro is doing the one called the Antlers, which is supposed to be the legend of the Wendigo. And for those of you who don't know what the Wendigo is a cannibalistic beast. I mean, they're kind of like a werewolf, but in Native American legend, a Wendigo is a cannibalistic beast that their stomach is like a bottomless pit. More, more meat it eats, the more hungry it gets. And when they turn into a beast form, they kind of look like sort of like some kind of a deer monster. But enough about the Wendigo. Let's talk about another folklore, Native American folklore, that I'm going to tackle, which they did an episode, which is more like a movie, on the Masters of Horror. And the one I'm going to be talking about is, of course, the Deer Woman. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Deer Woman, this one was actually based from Native American folklore. And the legend goes, they always say that, I mean, a lot of people used to say that the Deer Woman is like Bigfoot. I mean, a lot of people always have a lot of Bigfoot sightings. Well, there's a lot of people who seem to have Deer Woman sightings. And for those people who don't even know what the Deer Woman is, this is how it goes. Whenever there's a bunch of Native American guys starts having a bit of like a powwow or a festival or a party going on, coming out of nowhere, out comes the Deer Woman. Now, for those you and what she looks like, she appears as the most beautiful Native American woman you have ever seen. Absolutely beautiful. Body like a goddess. But that's her top half. Her bottom half, she has deer legs. And she always keeps them hidden by wearing long skirts. And what does the Deer Woman do? What she does is she lures men into their teepee. She lures them, and then after making love with them, she stomps them to death with her deer legs. Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird. But now I'm starting to hear more about some legends that now most supernatural folklore creatures are now becoming more helpful to people like us. Like, for instance, I mean, I heard about the hellhound. They always say that they're like dogs from the fiery pits of hell. And now I'm hearing that they start doing benevolent things. Like when you're really lost in the middle of the woods, sooner or later you'll find a hellhound who would guide you into the right direction, and you might find the place where you're at. Now I'm hearing that the deer woman, whenever a woman is in labor, there's always a deer woman who shows up who helps a pregnant woman conceive. Now, I know that kind of sounds a little feminist, but and and the one I'm going to be talking to you today was created by a legendary director. Now, one thing I know about the director is that he is, I mean, not only he does horror movies, he does comedy, and his name is John Landis. And some of you people will remember John Landis from the American Werewolf in London. I always kept thinking that that song "Werewolf in London" was supposed to be like a soundtrack, but big difference. And besides, that song was supposed to be about Werewolf in London. Werewolf in London. That was a song about Jack the Ripper. Ah, ooh, Werewolf in London. Ah, ooh. But how the story goes, you get a washed out detective who is a cop. He goes by the name of Detective Dwight Faraday, played by Brian Benben. Now, a lot of people remember Brian Benben from that comedy series that he starred in called Dream On. But his story, he's a no nonsense cop. He gone through I mean, his problem is that he got himself into suspension because him and his partner was dealing with a meth addict, and when he fired his gun, his bullet went right through the meth addict and hit his partner. Even though it was a mistake, they decided to put him in suspension because of it. And after he got back, his girlfriend left him because she couldn't tolerate his miserable years he'd been through after that mistake. Which that's pretty much true. I mean, you can learn a lot of stuff being on the police force, but never teach you how to cope over some mistake you have done. Believe it or not. And so pretty much he got demoted. Detective Dwight get demoted to animal attack cases. So he's pretty much every time when somebody is attacked by an animal, they always call him. And there was this trucker who all of a sudden heard a scream, and then he walked up to this one truck going like, "Hello? Is anyone there?" And this went complete silence, and then a huge force just bust through the truck door. So when Detective Faraday went on the case, he looked into the truck, and what he saw was a brutally mangled dead body. Looks like he was beaten to death by some kind of meat tenderizer or something. So him and this officer who decided to become his partner, Officer Jacob Reed, played by Anthony Griffin. They decided to they have decided to solve this case because this case was too weird for him, and one of the cops who is a pain in the ass to him, he wants to take over the case, but Detective Dwight wanted to take the case because him, Officer Jacob, and also that coroner named Dana, played by the lovely Sonya Bennett. Sonya Bennett looked at the body and started showing some things that's kind of baffling. When she looked at the body, it showed that the victim, I mean, he was going all bow chicka wow wow until he got stumped and it started right to his private and all the way up to his body. And of course, from the looks of the bruises, it's shaped like deer hooves. Now, Detective Dwight, he kept asking he kept asking everybody what they witnessed. All they saw was that the guy was drunk, happy, and he was with some woman who is so freaking attractive. It makes everybody wants to sleep with her. So, what Detective Dwight did is he's trying to think up this whole thing, and he always keep vision the woman was his ex. And first scene he thought up, the trucker was in the truck, and the girl who looks like his ex, she shows up, bring the guy into his truck, and then she carried a stuffed deer hoof as a weapon and start beating him to death with it. But he opened up his eyes and says, "Stupid." And then he trying to think up again of how it's going to happen. Now he thinks that the girl and the trucker looked out the window of the truck and saw a baby deer, and they both screamed. Dwight opened his eyes and says, "Retarded." And then the third thing that he's thought up, that now some man deer showed up, dressing up like a lumberjack, beat the trucker to death with his hooves of his hands, and kidnapped the girl and carrying her away like some horror movie. You know, all those. I mean, like every single horror movie you see, you always see a monster carrying a woman in his arms, while the girl looks like she's all passed out or something. And Dwight, after having that theory about the deer monster carrying the girl, well, I don't want to repeat what he said. I mean, he said the Queen Mother of dirty words, but to me, I'll say, damn. So, and all of a sudden, there was another attack happen. Turns out it happened in a hotel, and the victim was a guy. And then another attack happened, and it takes place in a hunting shop, and the store owner was attacked. But his body was all the way top to the building of the store. And for those of you who wants to know who played the deer woman, here's the thing. Well, it turns out that the deer woman is played by none other than Cynthia Mora. And I looked her up. She's not really Native American. She's a Brazilian model. So what? What's the deal here? I mean, they cannot find hot Native American actresses to play the deer woman, so they cast a Brazilian model? Brazilian model playing a Native American. I hear a lot of people always hired Jewish people to play Native American and Hispanics. But this. But to her credit, though, she did a pretty good job. I mean, I always thought that most models, I mean, they can't act out of a paper bag. I mean, you have a beautiful and attractive model who's pretty much in the top of her game, but when you have her start in a movie, her acting will be horrendous. It's not like the old days in the 70s, because one thing I heard what happens in the 70s, most models always take acting lessons before they decided to have a career as an actor. And in years, they become better actors. But to models, on the other hand, they rather skip the acting lessons and just do it. Even though they're not freaking God! And they started doing that since the 80s. It's true, back in the 80s, sometimes some people do hire people by their looks and not by their talents. That does happen in the 80s. But anyway, Detective Dwight and Officer Jacob, they went to a Native American casino, And they just sat down, have a couple of drinks, and trying to figure out the theory, what's going on. And what they figured out is that somehow there's a beautiful woman who have deer abilities and stomps men to death. And that's when that one Native American guy who is a card dealer, he said, "Oh, you're talking about the deer woman." And they were like, "What?" And that's when he starts telling them the legend, the same way I told you guys about the legend. And after he explained about their legend, that's when they start asking why she does it. What's her motive? Why does she stomp men to death? And of course, the card dealer says, "Why does every legend always have to have a motive? People do what they do. They can't help it. It's in their nature." Kind of reminds me of the story about the scorpion and the dog. Any of you ever heard the legend of the scorpion and the dog? I mean, there was a scorpion who saw a running river in front of him, and the scorpion wanted to get to the other side, and all of a sudden he sees a dog, and the scorpion walks up to the dog and say, "Hey, can I hop on your back and swim to the other side?" And the dog says, "I don't know. You might sting me." And the scorpion says, "Hey, I promise I won't sting you." And then the dog was like, "Okay, hop on." And then when the scorpion hops on his back, and when the dog kept paddling all the way close to the end, all of a sudden the dog felt a sting on his back. And the dog was like, "Ouch! Why did you stung me?" And the scorpion was like, I know, I'm sorry." And the dog was like, "You promised not to sting me." And the scorpion says, "I'm sorry. It's in my nature." And then the scorpion and the dog drown. So, I guess the only reason why the deer woman stomps men to death, I guess it's in her nature. I guess somehow when she lures men, it's in her nature to stomp men to death. Hmm. If that folklore is true, maybe I should try not to flirt with Native American women, because the last thing I need to hear that the Native American girl I'm hitting on turn out to be the deer woman. I'm just kidding. And after I heard about the legend, there are like tons of YouTube videos talking about the deer woman. And then much of my surprise, there is a Native American comedy series that is on. I think it's on Netflix. There's that TV show I seen on Netflix, but I haven't watched it, and it's supposed to be like a Native American comedy. It's called Reserve and Reservation Dogs. And believe it or not, Kinihito Horn, she plays the deer lady in that show. And I remember her from Letterkenny. She plays the Canadian Native American girl who is once Wayne's ex. I like Letterkenny. Yeah, that's right. I enjoyed Letterkenny. Big whoop. Want to fight about it? But anyway, this is the only thing I ever heard about the deer woman or deer lady, however they're going to pronounce it. But I'm sure that some people would do a little bit more about the deer woman in future. Hell, I'm thinking about writing a story about a deer woman who wants to live a normal life, so he falls in love with a guy and trying to keep her being a deer lady a secret. I'm thinking about it, but I just don't have enough process for the story, because sometimes when you're a storyteller or a story writer, you need to think up the whole concept. But this is my review for the day. If any of you like this review of the Deer Lady, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe. And Halloween is coming, and my Doctor Who Halloween special is going to be coming soon in November 31st. So I hope you guys gonna listen to it and enjoy it, because I worked the hell out of that audio, and my blood, sweat, and tears, well, more like all my voices are in this audio since it's a one-man show. So I hope you guys enjoy it when it shows up in Halloween. And well, I got nothing else to say, but trick or treat and happy Halloween. I'm the multi-voice reviewer. I remember it so I can jog your memory.